in the immunocompromised host, and we have Dr. Neha Rastogi Panda, who is Senior Consultant Infectious Disease, Fortis Memorial Research Institute, Gurgaon. She also goes to Shalimar Bagh and Okla. She is DM Infectious Disease from AIMS. She is a working party member India at Infectious Disease Working Party at ABMT, Transplant Infectious Disease Journal Associate Editor, member representing India at Immunocompromised Host Society, Indian representative at WHO TB Public-Private Partnership Learning Model, lead TB Steps at Fortis Healthcare, chief organizer of Forum of Infectious Disease in Immunocompromised, ICMED funded observership in transplant infectious disease from IRCCS, San Martino, Italy, travel grant and Indian representative for post ICPIC workshop and training at WHO headquarters, Geneva. And she would today talk about vaccination in the immunocompromised host.
Thank you, sir.
Dr. Neha, please.
Thank you, sir. So first of all, thank you so much again for giving me that opportunity to talk on a topic which is very important and honestly quite close to my heart. So as we were discussing about, as the previous speakers have mentioned about the vaccination and how they are important, one of the important category of patients is immunocompromised. Because they are immunocompromised, they need more protection. But because they are immunocompromised, their vaccine levels, their efficacy, when they can vaccinate, how much response of immune they will generate after being vaccination, that always remains a question mark. So in talking terms, there are very few papers or very few guidelines which talk specifically about the special host population or immunocompromised population. I've clubbed them together, and that arises actually with the need that why we need to know more about this population, because for the rising awareness about the need of vaccine, and I'm specifically talking in terms of adult immunocompromised hosts, basics of immunology in perspective to them, timing based, case based, and condition based recommendation. And then with the platforms like this, there is a urge of development of the national guidelines, especially for this population. So when we talk about immunosuppression to consider, their like list is like very big. Even a diabetes is keep on adding to the list, asthma, COPD. But the major chunk lies in cancer and hematological malignancies, HIV, uncontrolled diabetes being an Indian diabetic capital, we consider asplenic population. There is a lot of paraphernalia of patients who are now on steroids for different reasons. Lot of new TNF alpha inhibitors are happening, anakinras, immunotherapies are coming up. But the still major challenge in this population is their own vulnerability, that how they have a reduced vaccine efficacy, their complex strategy, need of tailor-made approaches based on their condition. There are still a lot of gaps, and of course, we are here to provide and propose solutions rather in terms of their flexible, controlled schedule. So just to talk about, we all know about the vaccine seroconversion, but when we categorize this immunocompromised population, a good response is something which is there in CKDs, in HIV, those who have a better CD4 counts, rheumatoid, SLE, even IBD, because a lot of monoclonal therapies are going for the IBD patients. Then comes the intermediate response, and very poor response comes when you are on rituximab therapy, because it practically depletes your whole B cell, which is a major reservoir of your antibody production. BMT, bone marrow transplant patients, patients who are chronic CLD, which are specifically decompensated, and solid organ transplant by the virtue because they are on the prolonged, or I would say lifelong immunosuppression. So this is like a generic immunization schedules for any kind of person who is immunocompromised, or for that matter, any elderly, where we have basic principles like inactivated, we can give at together. Live attenuated are usually contraindicated, and even if given, they are given much prior, like 4 to 6 weeks prior to any kind of procedure, or for that matter, transplant. So I'll just highlight a case because this is one of the common scenarios. We say that an elderly male who is being diagnosed with the chronic lymphocytic leukemia, the patient is on chemotherapy, and then they are being referred to our OPDs that what advice we will give to the patient regarding vaccine, because CLL by virtue less requirely the therapy, but once they require a therapy, they are kind of immune paralyzed. Already 50 plus immunosenescence is happening. Initially, there were PCV and PPSV 23, but now the PCV 20 alone and a single dose can supplement and surpass the strategy. And now we are offering upfront PCR, that is Shingrix, is very much being advocated, especially the patients who are on multiple myeloma, patients who are on bortezomib therapy, that usually when you have a malignancy status, we need to first understand that the patient should not be undergoing an active chemotherapy for a last 1 week or two, which have a B cell depleting strategy, something like a rituximab. Second thing is very important is, suppose there are chemotherapy and you have a leukopenia, or I would say the total TLC count is very, very less. There will be very less chance that the immune response will be mounted. Having said that, in Indian context, it is little difficult because we are not able to measure each and every anti-vaccine titer here. So for all practical purposes, I always prefer and recommend, and those are the guidelines backed up, that when there is something better than nothing, you always proactively vaccinate. Of course, in the absence of some acute infection. Now, talking about the very important guidelines is influenza vaccination, because this is something which we as a healthcare worker and majority of the population 50 plus and also immunocompromised takes up. So 2 versus 1 is a questionable mark. And most of the malignancies which works with the B cell or a plasma cell, it has been a good data backed by the blood and the beautiful systematic review guidelines that 2-dose vaccination gives a more longer duration of the serological. Talking about the vaccination in a hematopoietic stem cell transplant and the solid organ transplant. So there are 2 challenges in both the population. On one side, the solid organ transplant are privileged because their T cell recovery gets faster because you are not depleting the whole bone marrow. But on the challenging side, because you are on a prolonged immunosuppression, technically a triple immunosuppression, including steroids, for quite a long time, immune responses will be technically blunted for a quite long while. Whereas in a hematopoietic stem cell transplant, usually the T cell recovery start taking after 90 days. So when we recommend an autologous transplant where your own bone marrow is replaced by your own, especially in myeloma or lymphoma categories, it takes 90 to 100 days to start developing a T cell, and that is the ideal time period to start vaccinating. Whereas if you have a matched transplant from some other donor, then you have to wait for at least 6 months to even 1 year for starting the vaccination in this population category. Now, for example, in that particular time period, now how we ensure that the patient is being protected. So in that scenario, you can ensure the household members about the ring vaccination strategy. I'll come to that. Pre-transplant workup can be done where the inactivated vaccines can be completed 2 weeks before, and the live vaccines can be given even the 4 weeks before. Inactivated vaccines, as I mentioned, influenza is one example where we can even start up even in the high-risk transplant after 3 months, though the immune responses can be blunted, but there has been ample studies in the Western to show that the titers are satisfactory even after the 3 months of the transplant. And as I mentioned, that the minimum immune criteria which we target is there should be an absence of any acute graft versus host disease, which is like an immunological flare reaction. CD4 count should be at least reaching up to more than 200. Immunoglobulin levels at least should be starting rising or normal, more than better. And that is a minimum criteria to start vaccination for the person. When you have a steroid dose less than 2 mg per kg, or a tacrolimus for the solid organ transplant, lesser doses. That is the ideal criteria in the solid organ transplant strategy. So this is the vaccination list which I was mentioning about the malignancy as well as the transplant recipients. And this is the schedule which we usually follow even in our center, where you can have the mandatory vaccines of influenza, hepatitis B, hexavalent vaccines, pneumococcal, Shingrix, and the optional vaccines and the step dose vaccines are hepatitis A, the RSV vaccines, and even the varicella after the 2 years of transplant. So this is a schedule which we follow at our center, which we have opted from Indian Society of the BMT guidelines. Now, with the new advent in the hematological shade is the CAR-T therapy. We have all heard in the internet that indigenous chimeric antigen receptor therapy is now booming up for the lymphomas and the leukemias which are refractory. So even that schedules also allow to start pre-CAR-T vaccination, and after 6 months onward, as per the schedule, we give the mandatory vaccines such as pneumococcal, the Tdap or the DTaP, HAV, HBV, varicella zoster, which is more like a recombinant form, which we mention as a Shingrix in our daily practices. Ring vaccination is something when you are unable to give the vaccination to the recipient population, then you vaccinate the close contacts, which are sharing the common enclosed household of that recipient for the temporary time period. Given the theoretical risk of transmission of the live attenuated virus, we don't usually administer that, but at least the COVID vaccinations, influenza, recombinant zoster, that you can give, which have a aerosol-borne route of entry or a transmission, or a fecal route of transmission. So that can be given in that particular time period where the recipient cannot be vaccinated actively. Now, talking about the HIV, the list is almost the similar, but the 3 main essential vaccines which we offer upfront to all the HIV population when they are not having any active infection is, again, the influenza, hepatitis B, pneumococcal, and plus minus Shingrix, because the varicella zoster or the herpes simplex, even in the later stages because of the genital formation route, can give rise to the reactivation in form of that, which I have just mentioned in the slide. Now, for the splenic or a hyposplenic or a splenism or a splenectomy patients, we all know and we have all been reading that the major capsulated organisms, those of which are vaccine preventable, are pneumococcal, meningococcal, H. influenzae B, followed by even the Salmonella typhi, type R A, which is a typhoid conjugate vaccines, can be given. Now, few of these vaccines should be administered at least 14 days before if you are planning for an elective splenectomy. And in case of emergency due to some traumatic spleen, if you are given not pre-surgery, then at least post-surgery after 1 week minimum, or whenever the patient conditions becomes stable. Now, the next category of the immunosuppression, which is a big category nowadays, is your rheumatoid arthritis, rheumatological conditions. So just giving an example, suppose a patient is of rheumatoid arthritis, the patient is on methotrexate every weekly, and they come up, their disease activity is well controlled and normal inflammatory markers. So we can vaccinate the patient for influenza on the same day. And then you have to hold the methotrexate for at least 2 weeks after in discussion with the rheumatologist, because any vaccine will at least require 10 to 14 days to develop their IgM responses. So this is a list of the different kind of medication or class. As we say, glucocorticoids, you have to bring the dose minimum less than 20 mg per day, at least 10 mg for a better responses and 2 mg for the best of the responses, in order to decrease the immune blunt responses due to the glucocorticoids. Whenever there is a methotrexate, it reduces the humoral immune responses, and that is why it is always preferable that if you can hold for 2 weeks, provided of course your disease activity allows that, continue for the other vaccines alongside and stop for the post 4 weeks pre or post any live vaccine. For the others such as hydroxychloroquine, MMF, they can be given simultaneously together. Caveat is you still have to follow your precautionary measures at least for 14 days, because vaccine are not there to prevent any infection occurrence. They are there to reduce the severity and the post-disease complication, as we all know. So the common ones which we mention usually are rituximabs, methotrexate, and steroids. And as I mentioned, for methotrexate, you have to hold for the 2 weeks. For the other non-live attenuated, you can continue. For rituximab, you have to hold the 2 weeks post-vaccination for the simple reason because rituximab also works on the B cell responses. So any B cell therapy will blunt the whole immune response. So you have to wait for 14 days before you give the next dose of the drug or a chemotherapy. Now, for the few patients who are very high risk, and that includes a Hep B carrier family members, those who are traveling to the endemic areas, anticipated immune suppression, because a lot of patients come with ITP and refractory thrombocytopenia where we need to give rituximab. So in that cases, we can have an accelerated hepatitis B schedule, which is day 1, day 10, and day 21, and then the booster after 1 year instead of your 0, 1, and 6, because you need to get a more faster IgM responses against the hepatitis B. And in CKD patients or dialysis patients, we double the dose of the hepatitis B antigen as well. Now, vaccinations for the solid organ transplant, usually for the window, you can give ideally before transplant, 4 weeks for the live, 2 weeks for inactivated. And if you are planning to start it after the transplant, prefer to start 6 months after the transplant. And influenza can be given even 3 months after the transplant. Healthcare workers and close contacts, pets at the home should be vaccinated. And as I mentioned, hepatitis B, if you are planning to give pre-transplant with the lesser time schedule left for your transplant, give it at an accelerated dose and even higher doses. So this is a schedule which we follow for both the kidney as well as the liver transplant in our center. COVID-19 guidelines are usually not very changed from the previous past. So just to highlight that we do have the Cobivax now, Corbevax now. We have already previously vaccinated majority of the patients with the Covaxins and Covishield. So the vaccine doses remain similar. There is still not much clear-cut indication that whether we keep on doing the booster strategy because now we have almost achieved herd immunity in context to the COVID. Regarding the RSV vaccines, though it is not freely available in India so far, but we have seen the burden at our own centers that RSV is rising up, especially in the seasonal population and in immunocompromised that causes a long variety of pneumonitis and NRTIs. So there are 2 types of vaccines available. 2 protein subunit vaccine and 1 mRNA based vaccine. It's a single dose vaccine, and soon probably by the GSK in next 6 months they are launching the protein based subunit vaccine at our Indian population, for our Indian population. So looking forward for that. Now, this is in nutshell about the vaccines. One important and the last point to highlight is, before we talk about and we just mug up all these schedules, we need to know that there are, for the vaccination strategy, and especially I'm talking in immunocompromised, there are majorly behavioral and social drivers, and being advocating this vaccine in the immunocompromised for past 2.5 years now, we have been seeing that thinking, feeling, and the social process to activate, because most of the patients come and ask that, are they necessary? Or are they just preferred approach? Do we need to take it? What will happen that if we don't take it? So the major point of uptake is that you have to mention them and convince them that vaccine preventable diseases are as bad with high morbidity and mortality rate because of their immune condition. And it's always important to take up the vaccines because we have ourselves seen once the pneumococcal sets in, invasive pneumococcal disease has a mortality and a fertility burden as high as up to 60%. And that can be prevented by almost 80 to 85% with the mere single dose of PCV20 nowadays. So how comes the role of our people like us, the ID physicians, the microbiologists, the infection control people come, that you need to identify and strategize those conditions as a donor and recipient, identify and treat the active infection first, then recognize and define the risk of infection and how you can prevent that both by the hygienic measures as well as by taking the vaccination approach-based strategy. And then in that regard, we have started our own adult vaccination center, and eventually over the past 8 to 10 months with all these practices and discussions in the past, we have now developed and kind of streamlined the procedures for the vaccination in the different category of patients. So these people are actually customized to cure and customized to care-based approach people. So we need to know that what vaccines can be given at what time and very clearly define when not to give, in terms of, because you cannot just abandon and ideally say that you cannot give a chemotherapy. So we have to go alongside their own condition as well. So just to conclude, hepatitis B and influenza are the 2 major vaccine drivers, and especially in this population, we have a different route and a different approach and dose-based strategy in these population. Immunosuppressed populations sometimes require a higher dose, accelerated schedule, and even the ring-based vaccination strategy where you cannot give vaccine for a particular timeline. Live vaccines are usually recommended, especially in HIV, you can give, but for the other ones, there is a very much caveat that you have to start even after 1 year. Sometimes they are not even recommended at all. Patients with the malignancies before treatment start vaccinating now because poorer responses are still there in hematological malignancies, but advocate for the vaccines in all these population which we have just listed, because when we know, we intend, then only we can advocate. Thank you so much for your patient listening.
Thank you very much, Dr. Neha. It was excellent and, of course, an eye-opener.